Welcome to Building History, an orientation for researchers. My name is Kelly Zacovic, and I am an archivist with the City of Savannah Municipal Archives. Our program today brings you tips, tidbits, collections, and other resources to help you research property in the City of Savannah. If you can leave this presentation just feeling a little bit more confident and knowing where to start and knowing what to do, even a little bit more than you did, I would be ecstatic. So what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce you to the Municipal Archives, introduce you to what kind of collections that we have, walk you through the steps of using the Municipal Archives for building history research, and point out a few other helpful resources both locally and online. And we're going to wrap it up. We're going to tie it all together with a live demonstration of a property, just so you can see how it all fits. So in general, the Municipal Archives collects, manages, preserves, and makes accessible records documenting the City of Savannah's history. One of the major ways that we do that is by sharing the city's history with employees, citizens, and visitors through outreach activities. Our outreach looks like a lot of different things. Our outreach looks like helping researchers with their reference requests, social media posts, programs like this, and tours. So we always try to get creative, and we always try to share the city's history with our citizens. So this is just an introduction to our collections in a very broad overview. Since we are the City of Savannah, our records reflect the City of Savannah's incorporation date. The city was incorporated in 1789. Our collections are particularly strong from especially the late 19th century forward, though there are some gaps. And it's really important to know that we do not hold records prior to the incorporation of the city. So we do not hold colonial era records. Our records reflect the City of Savannah corporate limits, so the city limits. We do not hold any records for unincorporated Chatham County or the other municipalities in the area. So if you're trying to research a property on Tybee or Thunderbolt or Pooler, we unfortunately are not going to be able to help you. And another important thing, especially keeping in mind for building history research, our records refer to the corporate limits at the time being researched, not the city limits now. So even if something happens to be in the city limits today, that doesn't mean that it always was. And if your property ever fell outside of the city limits, you may get a little bit tripped up when trying to do research. And finally, our records reflect government functions. So if you just think about the ways the government interacts with its citizens, those are the type of records that we would have. So things like building permits, inspection records, tax digests, just all of the ways that the government interacts with its people. We held very few personal papers. The largest exception would be the W.W. Law collection, but we really do not hold papers of private citizens. So you want to use the Municipal Archives. Where do you start? Well, it's a great place to start with is our website. Our website is www.savannahga.gov/municipal-archives. Hopefully that's nice and easy to remember. When you type that in, this is what you will come up with. Now I've highlighted a couple things with red boxes that are important for you to notice. And I'm going to keep coming back to this theme over and over. But the number one thing that I ask of you if you're going to do building research and you want to come in and physically inspect records yourself is please, 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 please make an appointment. And you can do that right here, research by appointment. That will open up an email box. You can shoot me an email, let me know that you are interested in coming in to do research, and we can open our dialogue from there. We are a staff of only 3 people right now. We're very busy. We have a limited amount of space, so it's really, really critical that you contact us well in advance and let us know what you're working on and make an appointment to come in and see it. All right, now that I've given you that little soapbox, over here this is our Using the Archives tab. This is really the jumping off point for just about everything that you're going to need to do this kind of research with us. When you click on Using the Archives, this pretty much, like I said, gives you everything you need to know. Again, right here, it's not subtle. Contact us. Research is by appointment. You can email us here. If you were to scroll down, you would get some permission forms, a guide to our rules and regulations, things like that. But for the purposes of this program, we're going to focus on this panel over here. So at the top here, there's Explore the Collections. And if you were to click on that, that would take you to an alphabetized listing of all of our finding aids for all of our collections that are publicly accessible. And if you click on the one under that, is the research guides. Research guides are a really great place to start with our collections. And then, of course, digital collections. We'll come back to that in a minute. So, research guides. We have a research guide for a ton of different topics that you might come to us for. We have genealogy, of course, we have buildings, businesses, city employees, tourism, the port. And these are guides that give you the most helpful collections for researching that topic. They are not by any means extensive or complete, but these are most likely to get you where you need to go when you're researching that topic. So this is our building research checklist. This is what it looks like when you open it up. What you're going to have is these are major record groups in the first heading. If you click on them, they will hyperlink you to the finding aid for that collection. Under those, you have a list of the sub-series that are most helpful within that. They'll list the name, they'll list the date range, and this date range is really, really helpful because if you are looking for a record from 1930, you know that right off the bat, this isn't going to help you. You can move on to the next thing. This gives you the record series number, which is helpful when you tell me what you want to see. You might tell me I want to see 5600 CT90, and I'll know exactly what you mean. And then this is an important note as well. Some of our records are not necessarily accessible in hard copy in our facility. Some things are on microfilm at the library or on Ancestry.com. This is a great place to start. This is the Explore the Collections page. Again, it's an alphabetized listing of all of our finding aids that are publicly available. They'll tell you right here the name of the collection, its record series number. Again, those dates are really, really helpful when you're trying to weed out things that might not be of interest to you. And it also gives you the extent right here. I like to point this out too because if you tell me I want to see the Committee on Accounts, but you don't tell me what box or what folder you want to see, that could be anything in 7.5 cubic feet of records. So it just kind of emphasizes how much you really need to try to pare down and ask for as specific records as possible. So I've been throwing around the term finding aid a little bit, so I thought it'd be helpful to just give you a definition. This is sort of the textbook definition, but really what you want to know is that a finding aid is a descriptive inventory, but it gives you more than just a list of items. It'll give you information about the history of the items or the history about the department that produced them. It might tell you the scope of the collection, how the collection is arranged, whether the collection is arranged chronologically, by name, or by location, which helps you zone in on what you might want to request. And then it also, of course, does give you an inventory of the contents. So this is what the cover sheet of a finding aid might look like. This is the inspections department. So you'll have this organizational history right here that tells you a little bit about the inspections department in the city of Savannah. You can read it, see what they do. If it's something that, yeah, that's definitely a function that would capture what I'm looking for, great, you can proceed on to the next step. The scope and content will tell you all of the different sub-series, and the sub-series are the individual record types. So you can take a look at this and kind of weed out what you want to and do not want to see. When you scroll down, you will get to a sub-series finding aid, and this is what the sub-series finding aid looks like. At the top, you'll have the descriptive information, so you'll have the name, the number, the date range with a little bit more detail, and the extent for just this type of record. What's really handy here is this sub-series description. And within this, there's usually a description of exactly what the fields in the item might be. So this particular improvement books, they show you the lot number, owner's name, value of the improvement, and a summary by ward for each 6-month period in taxable value of each ward's improvements. So if you want to know the architect, you can right here, see it doesn't show you architect information because that's the only thing that you want to know. Skip it. This isn't going to help me. On to the next thing. If you are interested in who the owner might be, this could be something that's helpful. Arrangement note is something that's really important to pay attention to. Each record might be arranged differently. Some are chronological, some are by owner name, and some are by ward. If you don't know who the owner of your property was, then it's not going to help you to go into a series that is arranged by the owner, because you're going to have to look at every single entry in order to figure out if your item is listed there. So it does kind of help you. At least it also sets the tone for how you are going to select your individual items. And down, the last thing is the inventory of the specific items. Excuse me, with a description. So volume 1 covers 1875 to 1877, and so on and so forth. So if you happen to be looking for a record from 1892, you're going to request 5600 IN 10.1 volume 3, because that one covers 1892. More and more, we are adding to our digital collections page. Lots of people like to go straight here, see what they can find. But definitely don't skip the finding aids or the research guide. Our digital collections page has our digital image catalog, which you can go into and look at all of our digital images, or we have it broken down here by specific collections if you want to weed it out a little bit. This is what the photo records look like. It'll give you a thumbnail and descriptive information about an image. Also have an ever-growing number of collections available through the Digital Library of Georgia. We have all of our Savannah City code books through 1945 available digitally online. This is a great example of one of our collections that we have on the Digital Library of Georgia. We recently got a representative sample of our map collections digitized, and they're available there. So if you're interested in maps in Savannah, definitely check out the Digital Library of Georgia holdings. Recently, we received a donation of the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps. Sanborn Fire Insurance maps are immeasurably helpful when doing property research. The volumes that we have are from like the 1950s through the 1970s. They are all digitized and available through this website. And I also want to draw your attention to the Historic Savannah Foundation ward notebooks. They are notebooks for each ward in the city of Savannah, and they will have these data sheets that give you all kinds of information, and if you're very lucky, even a photograph of the property that is being documented on the sheet. The originals do still live with the Historic Savannah Foundation, but they've graciously allowed us to digitize them. Now that I've given you a little bit of an overview of our website, I'm going to walk you through some of the steps that you will really need to undertake in order to do property research. So step one, before you do anything else, you're going to need to know the legal description of your property. There are two ways to do that. I usually start with this example on the right, which is the sagis.org map viewer. If you go on sagis.org, you put in your address, you'll get this data card. And down at the bottom, there'll be this legal description. A legal description looks like a ward name and lot number or numbers. The reason that you really need to know the legal description of your property is that it is a fixed descriptor that really doesn't change over time. Once it's in the city limits, it's assigned a legal description, and that is going to be consistent. Street numbers might change every single year. So if you're looking for 204 Huntington Street, 204 might have been a completely different number in the 1890s. And so if you're only looking for 204, you're not going to find it. Additionally, most records that we have don't even give the street number. They mostly are just indexed by this legal description. So the sagis.org is a pretty quick way to go. If you want a little bit more information or to dig a little bit deeper, the Chatham County Tax Assessor's website, if you go www.chathamtax.org, you can pull up the property summary and the property record card. Right at the top, first thing, you have Lot 1, subdivision of lots E and F and Stevens Ward. So our legal description is there, and it's the same. If you have absolutely no idea where to start and have no guesses about when your property might have been built, and that's what you're trying to find out, the tax assessor's website, if you drill down a little bit, has a field for actual year built and effective year built. This actual year built, despite the very confident sounding title of the field, is an unreliable source of information, but it gives you something to start with. So for this property, it says the actual year built is 1890. I would always advise start with the actual year built, but absolutely never end with the actual year built. You always have to verify this information. It's usually a ballpark or something that was word of mouth, but it's always needs to be verified, certainly. The effective year built is an estimate used for tax purposes for when a building was modernized or updated. If you are interested in information about when a building was rehabbed or flipped or had some major thing happen to it in a much more modern time frame, the effective year built can kind of be used in the same way as a jumping off point, but definitely not as an absolute. So you have an actual year built, you have a guess of about 1890. The next step, I always recommend that people use city directories. City directories were annual publications, a little bit sort of like an old school yellow pages, white pages phone book. There's at least 3 sections. They list the residents of the city, businesses in the city, and a street address section. So for the purposes of property research, let's say we are looking for that house that we think might have been built in 1890. You could go to the street address section, find the street. Is the house there? Yes? Great. If that's the case, then you move 1 year back. Is the house there again? Yes? Okay. And keep going until the house does not show up anymore. If it's not there when you go to that actual year built, move forward in time until it shows up. That date, the year that it shows up, it's a good guess that it was either built in that year or towards the end of the year before it, but after the data for the city directories was captured. So just to take a look at what we've got here, this is the 1886 city directory. So this is the people section, the resident section. So they give you last name, first name. There's all kinds of little abbreviations that sort of have to learn to translate. The C here indicates that this individual was African American. He was a laborer, and he resided at West Reynolds, the 6th house from Lover's Lane. If this woman, this is Julia Aaron, she was a widow of Jay, and she lived at 240 Charleston. Women who were married were often not represented individually. They're usually represented in parentheses after the male name, but these are also a great way to kind of round out the picture of your home. If you know who lived in your home in the year that you're interested into, you can go into the name section, find out what they did, maybe who their spouse was, which then you can cross-reference into the into the business section down here, find out what type of business they were in and where that business was located. So you can kind of paint a nice little picture of what your residence life might have been like. When using directories, do certainly be aware of street number changes over time. These will tell you exactly the street number. Of course, those change. So if something is wonky with these, check your street numbers. And also be mindful of city limits. City directories do only cover the city limits. So if your property was brought into the city limits after it was built, it can give it a false sense of being built in that year, even if that is inaccurate. So just keep those things in mind when using city directories. Something that I like to use in conjunction with city directories, especially if I have questions about when something was built or what the street number was, are Sanborn fire insurance maps. Sanborn fire insurance maps were created periodically to survey the city for fire risk. So they document all of the buildings in the city, building materials, how many stories they have, porches, urban landscape features like paving and fire hydrants and things like that. So they give you a ton of just remarkably rich information about a building. And they also tell you the address at the time. So for instance, if you need to check what the address was in a particular year, you could go to the corresponding Sanborn and look it up. All right. So those are sort of the legwork that you do before you come to the municipal archives. But now you've gotten that out of the way and you want to come to the municipal archives. So back to our building research checklist. I mentioned previously that if it has a notation like use microfilm at Bull Street Library, that does mean that you will not be able to access the record with us in person. Some of these volumes are extremely large or extremely fragile, and since they have been digitized, we prefer not to bring them out unless we absolutely have to, and so we will refer you to other resources like the microfilm or Ancestry.com. We have, so city treasury records here are basically, if you think about it's a treasurer, it's financial transactions, right? So a lot of these are tax and property transfer and financial records. These clerk of council office records, these permits right here, these dates, so they are a little bit later for the permits, but they'll come in really handy from this 1909 to 1919 time frame because they are indexed. After 1919, they're just a straight chronological run. So if you want to find a permit in here, but you really don't know where to start, or you don't have it narrowed down to just a year or two, this can be really like finding a needle in a haystack to look through these records. I will definitely point out this trips up a lot of people. These city council meeting papers, deeds, and deed books to city lots are only city properties. These absolutely do not capture private property transfers. This only captures if the city was involved in the transaction. Our engineering department records, these kind of are a lot of your geographic representations of the city, our maps, plats, surveys, things like that. The private property surveys and applications with plats are very, very helpful. There'll be an application. These were applied for by private citizens. They weren't required necessarily. And these usually survey a lot before something happened to it. So if somebody were to sell a lot, if they would be about to build on a lot, they might apply for a survey and a plat. So if you have a survey for your property, it's a pretty good pointer that something's about to happen to it. These are indexed with a volume that is available online. So I'll show you that when we do our live research. You go in there, you find the corresponding numbers, and we pull the records. All of our retrospective maps and plans collections are keyword searchable using Control F. They are cataloged to the item level, so each individual map has an entry, and you can do a Control F search and pull up, try to pull up maps for what you're searching for. For keyword searching, I always recommend that less is more. So if you're looking for example, Lamara neighborhood, you might not put in Lamara neighborhood in the keyword search. You might just put in Lamara because it's going to look for that string of words together. If they don't include the word neighborhood in the map description, then it's going to turn up no results and you might miss things that you need. So start with one word, and you might get more than you need, but I'd rather you have more than less. These retrospective plans and designs, these are blueprints, but I cannot emphasize enough that these are only for city-owned properties. We do not hold blueprints for private properties in the city of Savannah. These are only city buildings. These inspection department records, they have a number of different types of permits in them, so they cover different time frames, which is great. But they do roughly capture the same information. You're going to get the owner or who applied for the permit, the date, the legal description of the property, and what they were applying for. Say a two-story house or a change to a carriage house. So even though they're different types and different formats, they are roughly going to give you very similar information. They just cover different time spans. And then I'm going to skip down here, these Metropolitan Planning Commission Historic Preservation Photograph Collection. Our collections were not previously strong in images of private buildings, but after we received this donation from the MPC, this has thousands of images of historic buildings in Savannah. It is also a keyword searchable collection. So, and again, I'll recommend if you're searching for a property on Barnard Street, do not type in Barnard Street, just type in Barnard and it will give you all of the results for images of Barnard Street. So, other repositories to know about. Of course, I think the municipal archives are pretty great, but we are not the end-all be-all for property research, of course. Another great place, especially to start, is the Chatham County Courthouse. Both the Superior Court Deed Room and the Probate Court do have helpful records for this kind of research. Deeds especially, a lot of people really like and find it necessary to do your chain of title research for a property. A lot can be learned from doing that. Kind of a lesser known record are the cadastral lot cards. In 1939 and 1940, there was a WPA project to survey all the lots in Savannah, and the individual lot cards are stored with the Superior Court. These will give you a brief chain of title on one side with tax valuation information. On the other side, there's usually a building footprint and with information about building materials or features of the property. And then probate records as well. Probate records are estates, guardianships, marriages, things like that. can also be useful for property research. The Bull Street Public Library Local History Room is definitely a must-stop for any kind of research in Savannah. They have city directories, vertical files, newspaper indexes, and even more. I'm sure their reference librarians can put you onto things that I don't even know that they have. And they also, Bull Street Public Library does provide access to Ancestry.com for free. So if you don't have your own subscription, it's always great to stop by the public library and access Ancestry that way. Georgia Historical Society also has a building research checklist like ours, but of course tailored to their collections. So if you go in there, definitely ask them for that. Things that we commonly use there, the Mary Lane Morrison notebooks, they're very similar to the Historic Savannah Foundation notebooks, ward notebooks. They represent Mary Lane Morrison, her extensive research into each of the lots in the historic district. And those notebooks were used to inform the Historic Savannah books, which we're going to talk about in a minute. GHS also has Sanborn collections, and they have extensive photograph collections as well. In terms of digital repositories, the Digital Library of Georgia is a must visit. Of course, we have a number of our collections on the DLG. They have the Historic Georgia Newspapers Project, which has, I think, they've over 1 million pages of historic Georgia newspapers, including a ton for the Savannah area. And they also have Sanborn maps. The Digital Public Library of America, the DLG is a feeder for the DPLA, and it's great to recommend the DPLA because you don't know what somebody in Wyoming might actually have. You'd be surprised the number of times that completely off the wall seeming repositories have relevant historical information for Savannah research. So if you really want to check all of your boxes, always go through the DPLA. The Library of Congress also has Sanborn maps. They have the Chronicling America newspaper archives, which is an extensive newspaper archive of American newspapers, of course. And they have the Historic American Buildings Survey collections. The Historic American Building Surveys are just like they sound. And if the building that you're interested in happened to be surveyed as part of the collection, part of the project, that is an extremely rich source of information. The New York Public Library Digital Collections, I don't think I've ever gone on that website and not found something to help me. They have images, they have stereographs, they have all kinds of amazing stuff. So especially if you're looking for images related to your research, always stop by the New York Public Library's website. These last two, they're not necessarily research repositories, but they have staff and maybe even small collections that could help you. So depending on your needs, the Historic Savannah Foundation and the Metropolitan Planning Commission, especially the Historic Preservation Division, are great local resources. So if you are a book person, this is a very, very select bibliography of some of the things that are that we use the most in our reading room. This Historic Savannah, a survey of significant buildings in the historic district, is probably the most used volume that, or at least that I use. There are 4 editions, and it is really helpful to actually check all 4 editions. What this building will tell you is buildings that were deemed historically significant that are researched. They'll tell you who they were built for, what year they were built, and they usually have an image of most properties. So the buildings that were deemed historically significant change between the editions, so definitely check them all if you're going to use these. I find the dates to be fairly reliable in the Historic Savannah books, but again, always double check. If you have the time and the ability, always dot your I's and cross your T's. Similarly, this Buildings of Savannah book by Dr. Robin Williams and others, it gives you a little bit more narrative about buildings in Savannah, but it's a great and well-researched reference guide. If you're just looking for general reference about Savannah, how does your neighborhood fit into the overall picture? Savannah Revisited, there's 2 editions. They are slightly different between them. And Savannah Square by Square are really helpful for that. And if you are super into architecture and want to sort of diagnose the architecture of your house, Field Guide to American Houses is really robust and really thorough, and even has some beautiful pictures of Savannah houses in there as great examples. And similarly, What Style Is It? A Guide to American Architecture are great places to start. But of course, these are just a drop in the bucket. So, how to make the most of the municipal archives. I'm going to start with my slightly sassy answer. Just don't expect, we do not have private property blueprints, and we probably can't tell you who the architect of your building is. I think I've said those sentences more than I've said just about any others. Just keep that in your mind. Those are things that just do not show up in our records. But in a slightly more serious note, I just in general recommend managing your expectations. You might call me up and say, I want to find a building permit for my property. Well, you might not find that sort of smoking gun building permit that has every piece of information perfectly laid out for you, but every little piece of evidence adds up and contributes to having an overall picture of your property. Sometimes what a record doesn't say tells you a lot about what you need to know. If your building isn't in a record, that does tell you something. It's not a dead end. That just tells you that you need to think some other way, go somewhere else with it. And even if you go through all of the steps and you find absolutely nothing, I think there's a certain satisfaction at least knowing that you looked and you really just dotted those T's and crossed your I's. Think creatively. So this applies to both how you might find information. If you're not finding it one way, what other resources might have, what resources might have that information just presented in another way. It also can apply to things like keywords, how you're keyword searching, and to spellings. If you think that John Smith is spelled this way and you're only searching for John Smith spelled this way, try it with an E on the end. Get creative. And that which leads me to human error is real. People are recording what they hear and what they see. So leaving things out, pages going missing, things being spelled weird, dates being written wrong. Definitely just take it all all into consideration. Apparently my cat had something to say about this one. Brush up on your cursive. It never hurts to know how to read a little bit of cursive. Handwriting is pretty crazy over time. But it's always something, there's somebody that can help you with that. And the cardinal rule for research is cite, cite, cite. Always document where you found your information. If you find it, you don't write down where you found it, call me up in 6 months and say, oh my gosh, I have this piece of information. I just absolutely can't figure it out. I can't help you. You're the one that was looking at the records. And we don't always have time to go and trace your steps. So if you write it down the first time, you will save yourself so much time and effort down the road. So with that in mind, we are going to switch gears a little bit, kind of hopefully sum it up, put all the pieces together. I'm going to do a little research demonstration on 402 East Huntington Street. I hope the residents of this aren't watching and think that it's creepy. I just happen to really love driving by this building, so I thought, hey, let's see, I'd love to find out a little bit more about it. So just to kick my research off, I took a look at the historic Savannah book that I mentioned, and it did happen to have this in there. So we have 402 to 410 East Huntington Street, built for the McMillan brothers in 1892. So that gives us a great lead. And of course, we have this photo. That gives us a great lead, but we can never take it for take this for truth, and we always have to double check it ourselves. So that first step that we always want to do is our finding our legal description. So if we want to do this via the tax assessor, so we got chathamtax.org. It brings you to this search page. We're going to type in 402 Huntingdon. Got to agree. Try it again. Be a little bit picky about how you put in the information, but okay, liked what I did. So this is our tax commissioner summary for the property. So right here, legal description, lot 1, subdivision of lots E and F for Stevens Ward. So we'll keep that in our mind. Lots E and F, Stevens Ward, and lot 1. If you want that actual year built, so let's you come down here to the property record card and scroll down, down, down. It's under this residential buildings heading. So we have a discrepancy already, right? So we have actual year built 1890, which does not agree with our historic Savannah of 1892. I'm going to tell you that I'm definitely taking the word of historic Savannah over the word of this. So I will be using 1892 as my jumping off point. But this just goes to show you how there can be a discrepancy there. It also has a footprint usually of the building and a photograph as part of the property record card. If you prefer the SAGES option, so if you do sages.org, you get here, click on the SAGES map viewer. It will open up this nice map of Savannah. You agree, type in your address up here. And 402 East Huntington. Great, awesome. So here we go. Here's our lot. It's on the corner of Habersham and Huntingdon, which also comes in handy. If you click on this, you should get this data sheet. And down at the bottom, again, you have the legal description, lot 1, subdivision lots E and F, Stevens Ward. This one happens to have the year built and the effective year built. I don't think that they all did, or at least they all didn't used to. So I wouldn't count on that being here. But if it is, then that's handy too. You don't even have to go to the tax assessor. So we have our legal description. Great, that's what we need. So the next step for me, for what I like to do, is I like to check the directories. So we're going to go on to ancestry.com. I hopefully am already logged in. If not, I'm going to be now. All right, so if you're trying to get to just the city directories on Ancestry, here's what you can do. Search all categories, scroll down over here to city and area directories. And I prefer to do it this way because I find it easier to browse than to rely on search results here. So it's US city directories, state, of course, Georgia, and we got Savannah. And I'm going to do 1892 because I'm going to side with historic Savannah on this one. And ta-da, there is a city directory for 1892. So I happen to know, so what I'm going to do is go to the address section of the directory. I'm going to start there. I'm going to see if our building is listed. So I happen to know that that entry is on page 51. We have Huntington Street, so our address is 204. And let's see, scroll over here. There's no 204. So does that mean our building isn't there? No, it really doesn't. So if you look here, we have Huntington from Waters Road west to Roberts. And sometimes they'll be like the corner of Habersham and Huntington. They'll be subdividing to kind of give you a sense of where you are. This year doesn't happen to do that. But since I have a sense that we're working from Waters west, 204 is going to be way, way too far west for what we want. So I think the street address has changed over time. So let's see if our McMillan brothers are living here. Ah, they are. So our McMillan brothers are living at 60 and 62. Again, you might think that that means that the address was 60 to 62, but without any other sort of guidelines to hang that on, I want to double check. I don't trust that just because it said the McMillan were builders that it's going to be the case that this is 60. So to double check that, I am going to go to the 1888 Sanborn map. Now, in theory, our building was not built in 1888, but it's still, fingers crossed, it tells us what the street address at the time would be. We're going to open it up. To use a Sanborn, they'll have this index sheet because it's a whole bunch, it's an atlas of a whole bunch of different sheets. I'm going to zoom in, find, all right, we got Huntington and Habersham. So we're looking for sheet 21. Now we're gonna move forward. And here is sheet 21. Huntington and Habersham, this corner. So our building isn't there, rest assured. But it does tell us that the address should be 48, somewhere between 48 and 42 Huntington. 60, where our McMillan brothers were living, is this nice grand house right here. So definitely not what we are looking for. Our building isn't here, but we can use this 48 to see if the right house is there. So going back to directories, do we have a 48? No, we do not have a 48. So again, does that mean that our house wasn't there or that it wasn't built in 1892? Not necessarily. Sometimes a building is built after the information was captured for the directories. So I'm going to go to the 1893. I like using this drop down. You can change between years pretty easily that way. And I happen to know that it's on page 35. So now we are looking for 48 Huntington. We got Huntington. Let's see. Yeah, 48. We've got first time our property shows up. 48 right here. Julian Schlee. Wait a second. Julian Schlee doesn't sound like a McMillan brother. What's going on there? So I hope you can kind of see how at each point, if you just stop so far, you might have a slightly inaccurate picture of what's actually going on with this property. This is a pretty great example of some of the ways that they can kind of trip you up. So we have Julian Schlee is living here in 1893. So again, this tells me the building was probably built late the year before or during 1893. So we're curious, who is Julian? What is Julian doing to live in such a cool looking house? So he is on page 189. And right here. So we have Julian Schlee. He is a general insurance agent. His business is at 116.5 Bryan Street, and he resides at 48 Huntington. So we already kind of have a little sense of what his life is like. And then I'm curious about these McMillan brothers. So let's see what they are up to. So we have, they have their own entry, McMillan brothers, TH and R, coppersmith. Not necessarily what I would have expected, but so they're coppersmiths. TH down here, Thomas H. of the McMillan brothers, lives in 60 Huntington Street. And strangely, you don't see this one too much, but Ronald actually resides in Fayetteville, North Carolina. But I think it says something about how prominent he was, or perhaps he spent a lot of time in Savannah, that he would be captured in the directory even though he didn't live there. All right, so we have it established 1893 is the first year that we are in the directory. Just to go back to the Sanborns for a minute, if we open up the 1898 Sanborn, I'll kind of show you what it looks like when a building actually does appear in the maps. All right, so we have our index sheet right here. Zoom in, we've got Huntingdon and Habersham, so we're looking for sheet 45. The slightly inconvenient navigation that they have here, but it's not too bad. So we've got sheet 45, Huntingdon and Habersham and Huntingdon. Aha, here is our property. Great. So what this tells me, the red is brick, the yellow is wood. So we have a 2-story brick dwelling, the D is for dwelling, with a 1-story wooden porch on the front and a 2-story wooden porch on the back. This, of course, is a series of row houses. They also have 1-story sort of carriage houses or garage or some sort of auxiliary building on the back here. And they had this little teeny tiny house that faced the lane. But so yeah, we have our building here. If a significant change had happened to the building over time, you could look at it in the subsequent Sanborns to see when, let's say, the porch fell off, or when the little auxiliary buildings went away. Things like that. Sanborns are great at sort of periodically checking up on the building and see what's going on. Luckily, it looks pretty much like we've got today, so I'm not going to go too much more in depth with the Sanborns. So we've got a date, we've got some names, and we have a legal description. So now it's time to go to the building research guide. So we're on savannahga.gov/municipal archives. We're going to go to explore the archives, research guides, and we are going to our building research checklist. So here we are. Again, we have our city treasurer records. So these tax assessment books, 1854 to 1912, 5600 CT 90. That is definitely in our time frame. I'm going to use these if we have some unresolved questions. I'll come back to these, but I'm not going to make this my primary focus. These are on Ancestry, so it's pretty easy to check on those from home. Real estate records, 1904. All of these kind of skip our time frame or aren't really what we need. Again, our permits, a little bit too late. I did check the index just in case to see if there was anything. There were no permits for this property in the indexed time period. I'm really not overly worried about finding any maps or plats that show the area. But that's definitely just a personal choice. I'm really just after date and record of when the building was constructed. But I am interested in these private property surveys, applications, and plats. So I went ahead and I opened up the digital copy of the index. I'm going to go to the Stevens Ward page. Ta-da, here we go. So what this does, what you do is you find the lot over here and it'll have a corresponding application and plat number. So let's see. Aha, so we have E and F, lots E and F. That's what we're looking for. They correspond to application number 358 and plat number 523. So what I did is I went and I will pull those records and we'll see what they have to say. Before we do that, let's see what else we have on our checklist. So the inspections departments, we have improvement books by ward, 1875 to 1895. Yes, that hits our target date. And later ones, sure, but what we're interested in is this 1892, 1893 date. Building permits, these are too late. These applications for building permits do cover our time period. So I will definitely be pulling 5600 IN 40. And I'm not really interested in these records of inspections. So since there's two things I'm interested in here, let's go ahead and open up this finding aid and see what we've got. We have, again, the description of what's going on with the inspections department, and we'll scroll down. The improvement books by ward, right here by ward. Other improvement books are organized other ways. So this is going to tell us the lot number, the owner's name, the value of the improvement, and a summary for each ward. What improvement books are is a record of any change. If no change happened to a property, it will not show up in an improvement book. But if a building is built, if a building is altered, anything that would change its taxable value, it should show up in an improvement book. If you open an improvement book, your lot isn't covered, that means it probably nothing happened in that year for it. So let's see, aha. So we have 5600 IN 10.1 volume 3, which covers 1892. Great, we are 1892 is one of our target years. So I'm going to, if I were you, I would request this. I'm going to pull this and we're going to see what it has to offer. So I was also interested in IN 40. These are building permits. So again, these permits are going to tell us the lot number and ward, street, request, petition number, petitioner's name, and the date. So let's see, Stevens Ward is going to be in 5600 IN 40, box 4. Covers our time period. It should cover Stevens Ward. So we're going to find out what we've got. All right, so what else do we have on our research checklist? All right, so Metropolitan Planning Commission Historic Preservation Photograph Collection. Let's see if we have any images. So we open this up, we're going to do it. I'm going to type in Huntingdon. So there are Huntingdon Street East images. And let's see, 200 block, 300 block, 400 block. Aha, look at this right here. 408, 402 to 408 East Huntingdon. And there's actually a bunch. Description here. So this one might be showing it from the lane. This one is taken October 8th, 1878 as part of the Landmark Rehabilitation Project, or maybe by that organization. It even gives you that 1892 date. Color, Stevens Ward, new construction, kind of tells you what's going on. And lo and behold, these are what we've got. If you wanted to see those, you would ask for image 3 to 600 through 605, and I would be able to provide you access to these images. So you can see here, this is the back of the building. It looks like maybe those little auxiliary buildings disappeared over time. So if that's something that you were interested in, Sanborn's might be a great way to check that out. Some nice images of the front. So yeah, I feel like that's a pretty successful result. Some pretty nice images of the building there that also give us information. Okay, so now we have, I think this pretty much covers what we're going to be able to find. The Historic Savannah Inventory Notebooks, we actually don't have through Stevens Ward yet. Otherwise, I would definitely be checking that out. So check back often to see when we've added more. But all right, so I went to our collections. So these are MPC images that we've gotten. Now, these are the private property survey and plat that corresponded to those in the index. So let's see what we've got here. We've got the date up here, February 13th, 1891. So they applied for this survey in 1891. So something was about to happen. That checks out. That fits with our date range. Our lot known as numbers E and F, Stevens Ward. Yep, that's what we're looking for. This says it's located on the North corner of Habersham and Huntington, yep, still checks out. Gives you number of feet. And this is interesting, said 2 lots being a part of the land conveyed by M.M. Brown to A.L. Hartridge. Those aren't the McMillan brothers. What are these people doing with this property in 1891? Down here, I desire to build a pond. So this tells you point blank, they want to build something on this lot. That's why they're surveying it. And the individual who applied for this is R.K. Bragdon. Again, not a McMillan brother. So this raises a few questions in my mind. These are definitely some things that I want to iron out, and it's going to push me in a slightly different direction. Who are these people? What do they have to do with this lot? Why is it credited to the McMillan brothers? Over here in the survey, this red, of course, is the lot that's being surveyed. Often these do have building footprints. If there was already a building in existence, there would be an outline of the footprint sometimes. Since there is not one, I'm fairly confident there was nothing here, and they just did this because they're going to start building on this lot. And down here, it reiterates the information that's on the survey. So, all right, this is good. This has given us some more information to work with. This is all working for us. Then I went to look at the 5600 IN 10.1, that improvement book, volume 3, Stevens Ward right here. And lo and behold, we have the McMillan brothers, lots E and F, Stevens Ward. They are being assessed for, so this says wood, this says brick. Sometimes this refers to stories, but in this instance, since we know it's row houses, 5 row houses on these lots on Huntington Street. And all right, so this is where it gets a little bit mixy. So usually if you put add right here, it indicates an addition or some kind of an alteration. Since we think that these were built in 1892, that's a little bit strange, but when you kind of look at this record in person, this looks like they might have gone back and changed or scribbled something. So this leads me to suspect that perhaps the buildings were built, they made some kind of an addition, and they went in and changed the assessed value and made a note about an addition. But they were being assessed for 5 buildings in 1892. That pretty much seals the deal for me to tell me that these buildings were completed in 1892. After that, I went to check the IN 40, and of course there was no permit for these buildings. So again, a lot of people think that permit is going to kind of be your smoking gun, but you can use other resources to tell you very similar information. So since this is still a little bit funky, we don't have an 1891 improvement book. There's always the slight chance that maybe it was finished in 1891 since they were applying for that survey so early, or perhaps one of our Brown or Hartridge or Bragdon were the ones who built it, and then maybe the McMillan brothers bought it. If that's the level of detail that you want to go, let's see what else we can find. So to go back to our building research checklist, I am going to go back to these city treasurer records. So CT90 and CT70 are both available on Ancestry. I just happen to know that CT70 are a little bit more accessible on Ancestry, so I'm going to go with those. But they're very similar. They'll tell you the property owner's name, the description of the property, the value of any buildings, lots, merchandise, improved lots, vacant lots, enslaved people, which is a whole other can of worms that we could go into, carriages, saddle horses, dogs, anything else like that. And they were produced annually, and we have most of the annual editions. The CT90 is very similar, except it is arranged by ward instead of by the owner's name. Like I said, it's a little bit more accessible in Ancestry by owner's names. So I'm going to go over here. So if you want to go on Ancestry to just our collections, go to the digital collections page, scroll down, records available on Ancestry. This link right here will take you to a portal that is only our collections. You put in John Smith here and it will only search within the things that we have on Ancestry. If you scroll down, these are the categories that our records fall into. So I'm going to go to the land, tax, and property records. Of course, it's going to kind of be annoying. But all right, so here, again, I don't necessarily like to search. I like to do the browse option. So I'm gonna guess that these are tax digests. This is an important point to note that Ancestry did not choose to use our names or our series number when they put in titles on here. So there's not a one-to-one match. So sometimes you kind of have to hunt around before you get what you're looking for. So let's see, tax digest right here. Since we're looking for 1892, I'm gonna click on this. Got to sign in again. Hopefully it won't make me start from the beginning. No, all right. So we are in the 1892 tax digest. So I'm gonna look up the McMillan brothers and see if they own the property and see what notes we have. So let's see. So, here we go. We've got McMillan brothers. And here we go, lot E and F, Stevens Ward. So they owned it in 1892. And let's go over here. These fields are the value of the lot and the value of the improvements on the lot and the total value. So let's see. We've got E and F, got the value of the lot, and look at this. They are improved upon by the end of the tax year of 1892. We have our buildings on E and F. Great. So, and it was for the McMillan brothers, they are improved upon. Now, let's say I want to be really thorough. I want to make sure that they were not there in 1891. I'm also kind of curious about who these Brown and Hartridge and Bragdon people are and why they might be on that property survey. So I'm going to back up. We're going to just take a look and see what the 1890-91 tax digest says. So let's find our McMillan brothers again. McMillan brothers. So brothers don't own it, but Thomas does. E and F, Stevens Ward. So here we go. So he did own it. A. McMillan owned it in 1890 and 1891, but it was not improved upon. So again, that tells us really clear we've triangulated it. It wasn't there, and then it was there. So we have ourselves a date range, which is really what you can dream of. So if that's what you want to know, if that quenches your thirst, you can stop there. Again, I'm just kind of curious, so I'm just going to keep digging a little bit. If I look for this, let's say this, I'm going to go back a year and let's see. So we have Thomas McMillan in 99. Let's see what happens in 1889. Did they own it in 1889? Let's see. So just through some movie magic here, let's see. So Baldwin, Charles D. He sold the lot E and F, Stevens Ward, to Thomas McMillan in the fourth quarter of 1889. So they've owned it since at least 1889. Let's scroll over. We have value. We have no improvement. no red flags here. This is straightforward. Just because I wanted to know who Hartridge was, I looked him up, since at least we know Macmillan's owned it since 1889. So Hartridge, how did it get from him to a Macmillan? So we have an A.L. Hartridge, who was mentioned on our private property survey. He did own lots E and F of Stevens Ward, but all this craziness tells me that it was sold off. And so he sold it to Baldwin in either the second, third quarter of 1889. And then again, Baldwin sold it to a Macmillan Brothers. So we have at least one of our names. We have a pretty good chain of title for the property leading up to its built. And again, still no improvements, so we're still on track. I'm just really curious again, who is this Bragdon guy and why was he applying for a survey for these brothers? So I'm going to go back to our city directories. And 1892, let's see who he is and what he's doing. So we've got, we had R.K. Bragdon and we've got a Robert K. And lo and behold, he is our contractor. So this makes sense. He was working for the Macmillan Brothers and applying and doing all their paperwork just like a contractor might today. He was bedding. That means that he didn't own, but he was renting at 35 Charlton Street. So for me, this kind of wraps up the picture. This sort of answers a lot of the questions that I have. If I wanted to take it forward, I could take it forward and see if in 1893 or 1894 we have any Macmillans owning property. So let's just see if I can find them really quick. I don't want to hunt around too much. All right. We have hunt and narrow in. All right, so we're in our MCs. We're getting close. All right, McKenna, McLean, we're getting really close. Macmillan Brothers. All right. Ooh, this is hard to see. E&F Stevens Ward sold it off again to Thomas Macmillan. Or no, from Thomas Macmillan to the Macmillan Brothers in 1894. So they were still living there, even though Julian Schley was living there. So clearly it seems that he was a boarder, perhaps, and might not have owned the property himself. So that kind of wraps up. I hope that's a good representation of sort of the steps, sort of some of the things that you might run into, and what you might expect to find within our physical records in the municipal archives. So to sum up, this is my final slide. These are some municipal archives research tips. Again, can't emphasize enough, please make an appointment with an archivist if you'd like to come in and see records. But before you do that, start your research online with the research guides, with the tax assessor, with Sanborns, with city directories, and be prepared with a list of items that you would like to see before you make an appointment, if at all possible. If you are not quite sure where to start, or if you're hitting some bumps in the road, please never be afraid to ask. We are more than happy to help. But when you do that, please have dates, names, legal descriptions, any of those questions regarding your research topic ready. And that'll give us something to work with to help provide you recommendations. And so finally, down here, to schedule a research appointment or for any assistance with any of our online resources, Our number is area code 912-651-6412, or you can email archives@savannahga.gov. Thanks. I hope this was helpful.